Okay, guys, a little video here, a revision video about the problems faced by the provisional government between February and October of 1917. However, this video is focusing basically on the problems that it faced initially at the start. So we start off with the economy. The Tsar had abdicated in March 1917, but Russia's problems remained the same. They were still experiencing food and fuel shortages and high inflation, and the provisional government was going to have to deal with that. They also inherited a system where they had dual power. You had this organization, the Petrograd Soviet, which had issued Order Number 1, which meant that soldiers in Petrograd agreed to only obey the orders of the provisional government if the Petrograd Soviet approved those. So you had a situation where the provisional government could only rule with the agreement of the Petrograd Soviet. You also had a situation where the two organizations, the provisional government and the Petrograd Soviet, are very, very different from one another. The provisional government consists of cadets and Octobrists. They only wanted moderate constitutional change, whereas the Soviet was made up of SRs and Mensheviks who wanted radical change. And this meant that disagreements between the two organizations was going to be likely. So there was a tense sort of situation developing there. The composition of the provisional government was also a problem for it. It had 12 ministers who represented many political parties, cadets, Octobrists, and one SR, Kerensky here. And Prince Lvov was appointed chairman, as he didn't belong to any party and could act as a mediator. But this is going to make joint action very, very difficult. It's going to make it difficult for them to make decisions about the big issues because they're looking at problems from different perspectives. Also, the fact that many of the members of the provisional government are middle or upper class leaves them open to attack from radicals like Lenin, who would claim that the provisional government didn't have the interests of the workers at heart. Okay. And I suppose that ties in with this idea of legitimacy. The provisional government was self-appointed. It wasn't elected. It had appointed itself as the government of Russia, and it would be unwilling, therefore, or unable to make big decisions before an election could be held for Constituent Assembly. Because if it did make a big decision, people would say, well, why do we have to abide by this? Who are you? Who are you to make decisions for Russia? So it suffered from that lack of legitimacy. And indeed, the Petrograd Soviet could claim to be more legitimate as it was elected by the people. Right, and of course, with all of this, the war is rumbling on as well. And this becomes a major issue for the provisional government because the war would have to continue, as Russia had commitments to its allies, and it would need investment after the war, and therefore it couldn't run the risk of annoying its allies in Britain, France, and so whatever. And the war was a huge problem. I mean, they were still struggling to supply the front lines, and desertion rates now were becoming an even bigger issue after the February Revolution, as thousands of peasants fled the front line, thinking that they were coming back to a Russia that had been changed and where they could grab land. And indeed, this is part of the law and order problem that the provisional government inherited. Peasants were forcibly seizing land from their landowners. This was a huge issue. And also, by introducing freedom of speech and releasing political prisoners in March of 1917, and political exiles returning, people like Stalin and later Lenin and Trotsky returning into Petrograd, that created a very, very volatile situation for the provisional government. So we can see that there were lots of problems that the provisional government inherited, and they weren't all problems that it created. However, there were also mistakes that the provisional government made. So when we look at the provisional government, we think about what issues, problems did they inherit, what problems were there when they took power, but then also mistakes that they made then between February and October. And I'll do another video about the mistakes that the provisional government made. Okay, so there you go.